Welcome, everyone. This is Tim Marlowe with Be the Better Local, and we're coming to you live here in our studios downtown Tacoma at the BD Local Studios, and we have our great friend Andy Vargo in studio and on the mic. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. And today's guest, already on the mic today, Joshua Freed. Welcome.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's good to be with you.
Nice. Thank you.
Glad to have you here.
And so, Joshua, we talked about the show a little bit before, and Be the Better Local highlights locals, influencers, businesses, nonprofits, musicians and artists, and really podcasters like Andy here, and
community leaders.
And community leaders.
Right.
And highlighting you in a way where you get to focus on what you do best, and that's the change needed in the world today.
Right.
And what we do best is really getting the locals in the community to get to know you more. So that's what today is all about. So welcome.
Thank you.
And you're here today not only as a local guy, but we'll learn more about your experience in running an election or electoral votes, and positions in government here in the state of Washington. But that'll be coming up in just a moment. But before that, we want to thank our sponsors, BD Local. We got Andy Vargo over here, Awkward Careers, so go follow him and all of his avenues of social media, and then Olive Group with Jake Nyman. So thank you, everyone. Joshua,
Yes, sir.
talk about it. Let's learn a little bit about you and your background, and we'll get into why you're here today, my friend.
Sounds good. Well, I am Joshua Freed, been married to my wonderful wife, Lindy, for 23 years. We met at Seattle Pacific University.
Okay.
And about a year after we graduated, we got married, and now we have 5 kids from 22 years old down to twin boys that are 14. So we have a lot of fun in the Freed home, no doubt about it. We've been involved in service here locally, of course, in our church and in the community. I served on Bothell City Council for a period of time for around 12 years. And then we love serving around the world in different countries, whether it's the Philippines and Kenya or elsewhere.
Yeah. Wow. That's not just your average run of accolades there. You're not only traveling the world, but you're being part of major organizations, which is city councils here in our local cities. So congratulations, man. It's not easy to step aside your personal life to look for the betterment of the community, and that's definitely something you're doing.
What is it that called you to get involved in the council and the political side of serving?
Sure. Well, I got involved in politics 25 years ago, so I became a PCO, which is a precinct committee officer, then an area chair, and then ultimately the chairman for the 1st Legislative District Republicans. Okay. And my mom and dad had already taught me to be involved. If you see something that needs to be change, then be part of that change. And so I saw the city of Bothell being left behind in the sense of looking at the cities of Woodinville and Kirkland and even Linwood moving forward economically and revitalizing their downtown. So I wanted to be part of painting a vision and bringing the community together to talk about where Bothell could go, create a place where people wanted to be, to dwell, and of course be part of community. And so got elected to Bothell City Council, started helping lead this revitalization team, and ultimately now we brought in about $450 million worth of private investment to see the largest revitalization of a downtown in Washington State. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Because as a land developer and home builder myself in my private life, to be able to move forward and say, hey, here's a larger vision for the city. It's a vibrant downtown now, and so we're well through the vision. Of course, there's more to go, and I think the citizens are super excited about the community that they feel now very proud of, and they are able to be part of.
And I think that's a really good point that you bring up, your background in your personal business, because that's what our community leaders are. And, in different times you need different people with different backgrounds, but they're all coming from their own personal side.
Right.
And that's, you see that need in the community, say, we can develop this and make this a better place, and here's what I bring to the table.
Yeah, well, I like when people bring, whether it's a pharmacist or you're in business as a developer, whatever business you're in marketing, to go in and serve your community for a period of time. I think should be term limits, where far too often people become career politicians and really what they know is just politics.
Right.
We need something far more than that. I think the founding fathers, when you look at Congress, had the idea that these would be farmers and pharmacists and whatever coming in to serve for 4 to 6 years at the most, and then go back to what they know, and then maybe the season brings them back in the future, but not seeing what we're seeing today, 40 years.
30, 40 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds, the way you're describing it, kind of sounds like a government of the people and for the people.
Oh, wow.
And
Kind of
by
like
the
the
people.
Constitution?
Yeah, I don't know. It just sounds
Constitution.
familiar to me. I don't know. It seems like a good idea.
Wow. So you're, looking back in the last 20 years or so in politics, I mean, when you saw the need for change and speaking to someone now that's watching and that just wants change, what would you tell that person right now? Just start taking action, or what is it?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody sees that there's an issue, don't complain about it. Step in and be part of the solution.
Yeah.
And that's why I decided to run for lieutenant governor this year. I'm doing a write-in candidacy for lieutenant governor because I saw what was happening with addiction in Washington State. My wife and I ran what's called Initiative 27 3 years ago because King County and the city of Seattle wanted to open up what's called government-run heroin injection sites. So these are places where if you're addicted to heroin, you walk in the front door, you get the tourniquet for your arm, you get the needles, the syringes, the pan to cook your heroin in, and even the matches. So everything to inject the poison in your veins. And Lindy and I thought, well, that's absolutely ridiculous. No, you get people off of drugs to turn their life around. You don't enable them in this pathways towards suicide. So we didn't see anybody taking that strong effort against the city of Seattle and King County. We actually had to fight them all the way to the state Supreme Court. We got 20 different jurisdictions to ban heroin injection sites. Went up to Canada 5 different times to visit East Hastings, where they have the first heroin injection site in North America. And it's heartbreaking. Young girls are walking down the sidewalk. They're just gaunt in their face because they're selling themselves for dollars for their heroin addiction. Wow. And yet you have a government up there that is enabling these people, 5,000 users in a 5-block radius. Since they normalized the use and possession of heroin, death rate from illicit drugs in Canada, in BC, has increased by 800%.
Wow.
And that's the mentality they want to bring here. But a caring, loving society says, no, we're not going to let you live under a tarp surrounded by garbage and needles. We're going to get you off of these drugs to make you a productive member of society again. That's what I believe that we're called to do.
Wow. And that's so important to just take a moment and think about that, knowing that our society is a direct reflection of our government. And if you are having issues, rape being up, murder being up, homelessness being up, then you have to look at the policies that are holding these parts of our society accountable.
Yeah.
And if, we have multiple programs, I don't know how much it costs. I think I heard one statistic like over $100,000 a year for one homeless person in Seattle to live. I'm like, man, not that I want to be homeless, but man, that sounds like a good deal for some reason. But at the same time, you're enabling someone to continue a lucrative, lawless lifestyle.
It is a state of lawlessness today. Certainly, I went down to Chaz when it was established for that period of time, where Jenny Durkin called it the summer of love, and it was obviously anything but. When you went down there, if you tried to share your First Amendment rights and the people disagreed with it, they violently drag you out or shoot you where you stand.
Wow.
And so we've seen in Washington State rape up by 65%, murder up by 42% over the last 8 years. Even just saw new numbers of how it's increased substantially recently here in Tacoma. And that's heartbreaking. For somebody who's pro-life, I recognize, of course, the unborn human being, but also those that are living on the streets across the state of Washington, where even in Yakima, they lock the doors to the Chamber of Commerce during the middle of the day because drug addicts are walking in. Now, you'll have one side perspective say it's compassionate just to let people continue to do whatever they want. It's their decision. It's their life. And then you'll have the far right side say, and I'm a very conservative Republican, but you have the far right say, well, these people, just let them be. We just lock them up. I don't want to even see them anymore. Well, the results of those two mentalities are the same. People's lives are ending in death. And I think a caring society says, no, we need to have resolve to enforce the laws in the state of Washington, at the same time set up proper programs in a public-private partnership to get people off the drugs into job training and productive members of society again. Because like you say, we spend $1 billion a year on the homeless industrial complex, yet we're not seeing proper resolve and change.
No.
Yeah, and I think that you really hit it on the head when you talk about the difference in both these viewpoints to come together, because there's this idea that if you want to reduce homelessness, you must be cold-hearted and not want to do anything for them. And it's like, no, we want to help them in a way that they are not needing to to be living under a tarp.
Right.
And the solution for that is different in every case. There's so many different reasons why people are out there.
Yeah.
But
I mean, as a believer myself, I'm very clear about that. That motivates me to love my neighbor. That helps me recognize that others are equal. Sometimes people walk by somebody on the streets or looking down to them and just don't even want to see them anymore. But yet we're called to something greater, that when people are in a position of suffering, we need to reach down and be part of that solution, not just count on big government to grow, because government is not human in the sense that we are. And it's human on human connecting to make sure that we can help step into somebody's lives that currently is not able to help themselves.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're talking about right now are the addiction programs in this area. You and your wife had kind of helped formulate one of them. This is one of the key roles as lieutenant governor, and this is a position that you're currently running for. So if you're listening and watching, lieutenant governor, go down to the right in position. Let's do it now. Joshua Freed, fill in the bubble. Joshua Freed, write it out, and please support. But listen into the next couple key roles, which I think has a dramatic effect on the current community that we see here in the Washington area, and that's the economic and trade development, and then the president to the state. Do you mind just talking about those two?
Sure.
key
Yeah,
roles?
there are definitely key roles for the position of lieutenant governor. And so this is why I thought this is a position that's so important for conservatives such as myself to step in. And so I am doing the write-in campaign, as you mentioned. 2 Democrats are on the ballot and in the pamphlet, and I don't believe that both are the ones that lead this state forward when it comes to economic vitality. The lieutenant governor is over trade and economic development in the state of Washington. Maybe some people weren't familiar with that, but we've seen a 27% decrease of exports in Washington state prior to the COVID crisis. And so I'll focus on making sure that we have trade routes open throughout the world. I lived in Egypt, I lived in Pakistan, we do ministry in the Philippines and Kenya, and go to Israel each and every year. And there's a worldwide market out there. Yet we've seen our market share in Washington state continue to decrease under the current leadership. And that's why it's so important that we have a new perspective. Somebody who has run his own business, such as myself, for 15 years, who traveled around the world to understand that there's a world market of which we can tap into. I want to make Washington competitive again, because we see even Washington products like our apples being grown in Chile rather than Washington because of the red tape regulations here that are placed on our manufacturers and our producers that have pushed us out of our ability to compete even in other states, let alone the rest of the world. That can change. Another key role, as we've already touched on, is you oversee the addiction programs in Washington state. I want to get the government ultimately out of people-on-people treatment. I want to provide the underutilized government facilities like McNeil Island, Evergreen State College, and then bring in private groups that actually understand detox, recovery, job training.
Mental health.
Yeah, many of these groups I've met with actually have an 80% success rate after a 1-year inpatient treatment program.
Wow.
And then ultimately what you mentioned is I am the president of the Senate as lieutenant governor. And so all these bad bills that are being introduced, like right now we're going to see a $7 billion shortfall with the $54 billion budget. The Democrats want to come forward with tax increases, but we really need to see that we're having tax decreases, reduce the size of government, because we, the people, are existing today to just support a growing government. We've seen 3,064 businesses go out of business this year in response to COVID, continuing to put a burden on those small businesses and individuals with more taxes, clearly will continue to kill the economy in Washington state. We need to open up the opportunities for small businesses to thrive in Washington state, because that's jobs. Sadly, today, what's being exported out of Washington state is not our product, it's our jobs. And that needs to change.
And I think that's an important distinction that you made about the decline in exports was pre-COVID. I think people can easily look at the state of the situation, the world right now, and think, oh, well, it's COVID, and they write off a lot of things that could be fixed and should have been addressed ahead of time.
Yeah, for sure. So it's so important. I mean, many bad bills go to the Senate floor. For instance, this year at 2:30 in the morning, comprehensive sex education was passed. And this is mandating that all 294 school districts in the state of Washington shall ultimately have what I call pornographic material taught to our youngest innocent kids. And I would like to see that we could protect our kids in our society. So many folks work to get referendum 90 on the ballot. Now, I know this is so strange, even though we collected a record number of signatures on referendum 90. We now need to do all we can to reject it. So by rejecting referendum 98, we're rejecting the decisions that were made in the legislature, therefore rejecting comprehensive sex education. So my hope is as people go to the ballot, they can recognize that we need to reject it and therefore keep these young innocent kids safe in our schools.
One of the things that I listened to you talk on a couple of podcast shows here, and so, one of the things that was just a startling number, even in the midst of a pandemic and COVID-19, there's an X amount of signatures that you need for something to pass.
Yep.
And I want you to tell a story, but it's startling numbers on what's needed to what you actually received. Go ahead and talk about that.
Absolutely, yeah. So referendum, you have to get a certain percentage of the registered voters that have voted, and so what was required this year was 130,000 signatures. Throughout a grassroots groundswell of support across the state of Washington, nobody took credit for it. We all just collectively worked together as people standing against comprehensive sex education. Rather than just 130-some thousand, we got 266,000.
Wow.
So double the amount needed, and it was a state record during the stay-at-home order. Clearly would have been at 500,000 people. But when that was passed at 2:30 in the morning, this agenda that was pushed forward, people of conservative values who value the innocence of their grandkids, their kids, or their nieces or nephews say, no, we must fight this onslaught of comprehensive sex ed going into the schools.
Yeah.
And why is that so? Why is that such an important issue that it's being pushed through at 2:30 in the morning? Like, it seems like
that
staying up
sounds so
late
weird.
for economic relief, for COVID measures. Like, it seems like there are reasons that you want people working overtime to get issues through, and that just doesn't seem like one that should be that.
Well, what's mind-blowing is the Democrat majority who passed it forward said, well, don't worry, you can opt your kids out of the program. The problem is it's not just seventh period health class, and the parent says, I want to opt my kids out. So a Republican legislator tried to push forward an amendment and said, well, let the student withdraw from that curriculum if they don't feel comfortable. Democrat legislator spoke in opposition, and she said, no, these young kids, their minds don't develop until age 20, so they wouldn't know to opt out. I'm thinking, hold on a second. These minds don't develop until age 20, yet you want to compromise these minds as young as 5, 6, 7 years old. Yet it's all part of that agenda. Let Planned Parenthood be in the middle schools, and then let 13-year-old girls get abortions without parents knowing it. But wait, their minds don't develop until age 20, but you're letting them make one of the most difficult, damning decisions that ends a human life at age 13?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, this is serious stuff, and I really hope that people out there are listening and tuning in, and in the midst of just being busy. We're all busy, but there's a time to stand up for not only our own voice, but the voice of those that cannot speak on their behalf right now. And as three fathers sitting here today, we're strong about wanting the best for our children. So definitely read about it, listen, tune in to more information on the R90, because you have to reject it, at least in my eyes, because I can't fathom this type of material being taught to my own daughters in a way that, I won't even be there to see how it is. So, this is just crazy stuff, but this is what this time of the year is so vital for our community, because we have got to learn how to not just sit on the sidelines or sit on the fence, but you've got to, if you like a Republican for this and you like a Democrat for that, well, that's fine. Just don't choose one party or the other just because you want one party or the other. You have to look at all these different bills and laws that are going in, and really you have to think of you first. Because, this is where the change starts, is where we decide to take action to move forward in a better life. Joshua, I just want to say thank you for coming in studio today. I know you're a very, very busy gentleman, but before we head out today, I want to leave our audience with a few last thoughts.
Sure.
That, coming from you, and then we'll learn how to support you.
Well, I appreciate you both and the opportunity to be able to speak with you today. But what I'm asking people to do is when they get their ballot, and hopefully you all have it in all 39 counties already, is after you vote for president, as for governor, make sure you write in the name Joshua Freed for lieutenant governor. Fill in that little bubble. If anybody has questions, you can go to joshuafreed.com. That's Freed.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. You have to write it in and fill in the bubble.
Fill
right?
in the
Like,
little bubble and
it's-
write the name Joshua
Don't
Freed.
let your vote not be counted because you didn't do all the steps, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Sadie, do we have a photo to put up?
I can.
Yeah. Well, we're going to make sure that we have a photo so everyone understands just the quick, easy process. The 1, 2, 3, go down Lieutenant Governor, fill in the bubble, and write in Joshua Freed's name. So thank you again, Joshua, for coming in studio, and thank you, Andy, for obviously being here and
Always.
supporting our lovely show, Be the Better Local. And until next time, be the change needed in the world today. We'll see you.